Welcome to the Westminster Tradition, a podcast with lessons for the public service. I'm Alison Lloyd-Wright, Managing Director of the Good Trouble Group, and joining me today on Ghana land, as always, are my two fellow recovering public servants, Caroline Crozer-Barlow.
Hello, Alison.
And Managing Director of Good Government Advisory, Danielle Elston.
Hello, Alison.
We are in our second episode looking at the question of evaluation. We ended our last episode with what Caroline called the real lesson from the Badger Cull trial. Almost never does evidence tell you things in the form you expected to find them. I'm still worried about the badger activists who predicted the perturbation effect, essentially the badgers doing a runner, because they were scared from the beginning, and the pest control scientists inside government who were sceptical that you could stamp out a population-level problem through targeted culling. Those people might have been wrong. Government wasn't stupid to want to verify the questions, but the way the trial was designed, it had to proceed as if they were starting from a knowledge base of zero, as if no one knew anything. And so some of those things that people definitely did know took 10 years to find out. Today we're going to take a step back and look at the broader system of evaluation. Government says it wants to do better at this. We all agree that we should do things that work. So how do we know that what we're doing works? And is there a tension between measuring whether something worked and learning what works, when, and with whom? Caroline, take us away.
Great. Look, first, it's probably worth asking why we do evaluation at all, like why people commission them, because I will confess that I was never a good commissioner of evaluations. I always kind of poo-pooed them when I was starting stuff. And so the good people at the Australian Centre of Evaluation have put out something called the State of Evaluation in the APS. And in it, they actually surveyed all the people who do evaluation and said, why do you do it? Which I thought was like an excellent thing to do. And the list that they provide, and it's in the notes I've provided to Alison and Danielle, and we can pop it in the show notes, is definitely not MECE. Sidebar here. Have you guys ever heard of this idea of MECE?
Not until I open this document.
So just shout out to Joe Connell and Stacey Fox at Dandelo, who mocked me for not knowing what MECE was when I was having dinner with them once. It is mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, which is actually a great framework. Like, does everything on your list kind of add up to the whole thing, and are there no crossovers between the dot points? Anyway, this list is not MECE. But what I will say is that 3/4 of evaluations, according to the APS people, are commissioned to improve implementation. 2/3 of them are commissioned to enhance accountability, and about the same again are to promote transparency. And then you get down to really small numbers, like 23% are to reduce waste, or which I like, or 40% to seek funding renewal. But anyway, I want to think about this kind of...
I'm surprised that's that low, but anyway.
Let's be explicit about it.
Exactly right. I think in the not-for-profit sector, certainly many more evaluations are commissioned for
because it's often we'll give you 5 years and then you talk to us in year 4 and you evaluate whether you did anything. So maybe that's where my lens comes from.
Yeah. These are government evaluations, not people trying to sell stuff to government. Anyway, so 2 of those, accountability and transparency, are backward-looking, and one of those, improving implementation, is forward-looking. And I guess I want to think about the tension between these 2 modes, because I don't always think that they're compatible. And I think we're in a system where kind of backward-looking tends to win. And that's because accountability is like a really, it's a big deal in government, as it was. And I think we talked about this last time. In government, I think one way of thinking about accountability is that it's the gap between what was promised and what was delivered. And so evaluation is a really useful way of of doing that. Does that strike you true?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bit more to accountability than that definition, in the sense that a lot of it's to do with the not just the what was promised and what happened, but a lot of accountability is the who was responsible for what and how did that happen as well in accountability. So I think that's a lot of accountability. And I'm interested in having such a high amount of people saying we do it for accountability on the basis that we do so many other things for accountability. Like, so, you know, to improve implementation, we actually don't do, like, there are other things we do to improve implementation. We do user testing, we do there's lots of things we do, some things. But with accountability, it's like, it feels to me like that's what a whole bunch of everything from kind of audit to oversight bodies to delegations is to make sure that the accountability bit's right. So I'm not sure. I'm surprised by that. I would not have thought of evaluation.
I take your point,
as being
but I think it maybe is
measure.
just. I think it's maybe just that we're using the same word in a couple of different ways, as is often the case. I think this is about program accountability, is probably what I would call it. Did the thing do what it promised it would? Did it achieve the outcomes it promised it would achieve? And someone needs to ask and answer that question. So,
yeah, and I think so. The thing the thread I wanted to pick at, and it might not be quite right, but is this idea that in that backward looking frame, you have essentially two measurements, right? Like you have a kind of beginning point and an end point. And you're like, here's what we started with, here's what we intended to end with, and kind of here's how we actually ended. And I think that approach kind of structurally makes it hard to look at what's working as opposed to kind of what's the gap between, or the alignment between what we said we would do and what we did. So it makes it structurally hard to kind of unpick and look at what are things that might be overperforming or what's doing better, understanding what's actually happening that might be a bit messy, that doesn't actually fit any of your existing categories, which is definitely something we talked about in the badges. And even kind of building a sense of kind of how you might measure different kinds of things next time. And so that's kind of what I want to unpick in this episode a little bit, all really in a lead up to us having a chat with Eleanor Williams from the Australian Centre for Evaluation, where I really want to kind of poke her around test and learn, because I'm kind of so interested in this challenge, right? Like, is test and learn, I think, is going to hit against this idea of backward looking accountability. So that's why I'm going down this slightly weird rabbit hole. But before we go down it, I did just want to call out, largely because I really liked the article, and maybe I'm just wedging it into the episode, but there was a really good article.
I'm about to do the same with the book I'm currently reading, so...
Brilliant. Like, sometimes you're just like, it's sort of related. Anyway, go with me. Andrew Greenway wrote this really great article about Sir Ollie Robbins' appearance before a select committee in the UK on the Mandelson screening debacle. And I think he sort of, you know, and it's Senate estimate season at the moment, so I'm doing a lot of thinking about what it means to kind of to appear in one of those forums. And he calls the skill that's being promoted there the Accountability Act. And he notes that it's like the skill is not governing well. It's not kind of how well you learned. It's being able to explain yourself after the fact of what happened. And he kind of, I think he sort of talks about how that tends to make you think about inputs and processes. Like, I wrote this piece of paper down, I looked at this particular thing, I ticked off this box, and doesn't get you to look at kind of outcomes and performance. Whoops, we accidentally approved Peter Mandelson, who turns out to be a terrible person, to be our thing. So I think he puts his finger on something there that's interesting to me. He talks about how no industry is worse than government at learning from past successes. Like, we don't spend any time kind of seeing what went well, and we do a lot of kind of what went wrong. So anyway, I think that to me is like a kind of interesting tension around how our structures kind of reward and promote people who are good at doing that backwards looking sense making. And yet I think what we need more of probably is that forward looking kind of, how are we improving on the thing that we have now? Am I off base?
Yep.
Do you want to go, Danielle?
No, you go, Alison.
Okay. Okay, so a few things. The first thing I was thinking about is, like, let's not pretend that estimates is a perfect accountability process, and I like the term act in this. I had to explain to someone who was used to fact-finding in a court of law that their appearance before estimates would not be a endeavour of truth and fact-finding, but would in fact be an endeavour of political point scoring and looking good in front of the cameras. That said, I think there's nothing stopping the people asking questions in estimates from asking the types of questions that you're speaking to, Caroline, if it also met their needs. But the book I also want to wedge in here is I'm currently reading Inside the Box by David Epstein, which is a book about the benefit of constraints. But the chapter I'm reading at the moment is about how in the year 2000, when the US decided that for medical studies you were going to have to pre-register your hypothesis, so you couldn't retrospectively look at the data and go, oh, it didn't quite prove what we thought it would, but it proved something else interesting.
But it works for erectile dysfunction.
Exactly. Which created this, like, quote-unquote crisis in science that wasn't a crisis in science. You are still allowed to capture your kind of unexpected findings and kind of explore other hypotheses once you have the data and it's telling you something different. But it is that kind of exact thing that you're talking about, like having to say in advance, I think that if I have a hypothesis that if we intervene in this way, it will create these outcomes. And then not still being open to test and learn and seeing what it tells you along the way, but also being able to explicitly measure, potentially for Treasury and funding purposes, whether it did actually achieve your outcomes has some value. Danielle.
I love that.
So that is fascinating, and I want to hear about these constraints more. I am interested in how much unfixed. So we put our hypothesis, we want to make the train run faster, or we want, particularly in social policy where it's less quantifiable as well. But often through the process, we do meander somewhere else in implementation. And I'm not sure that's a bad thing necessarily, because frequently when we set out to do things, not that budget processes aren't hugely rigorous, but occasionally governments just announce great intentions and then you have to figure out what it is that it will actually mean in practice. And in the first 3 months and 6 months, your scope moves around while you try and figure it out. So that beginning hypothesis, I worry about when you put the starter's gun, and I often worry that
the whole theme of the book is you should do all the thinking up front. And like,
okay, but like,
and not
they met a politician?
Hypothesis. Like, no, and the book isn't really about public service. It's a book of broader context.
No, so I think it's where we put the starter's gun is really important. Like, where is the hypothesis? Because I wouldn't want it to be the announcement. I would want it to be the work that came after that. I know that usually you should do the work before that, but let's assume that sometimes we don't.
Have we talked about the lifts before? Lifts going faster? Because the other thing that I think is a risk here is Danielle's like, so we want the trains to go faster, but I'm going to talk about lifts.
Okay,
because
fine.
People complained about waiting for lifts. The lifts were taking too long. And the answer is not actually to make lifts go faster. It's to install mirrors in the lobbies so that people can look at themselves and they thus don't experience the wait as being as long or as painful. In the same way that Uber kind of, you were still waiting just as long as you would have for a taxi, but you could actually see where it was on your phone, and
you're
that
not
made
anxious.
The wait less painful.
Yeah, look, the Uber one makes sense. I mean, as a lifetime hater of the lighting in a mirror anywhere near a lift, I'm not sure that I want to know who they tested that hypothesis with.
I'm telling you, Danielle, it works. It's why every lift you get into almost anywhere is mirrored. So I do think
nothing finds a chin hair faster than a government lift.
Could not agree more.
Danielle, this isn't the perimenopause podcast. This is the public sector podcast.
All right, I feel we have strayed. Anyway, Caroline, bring us back to something assembling the purpose of this episode.
Okay. All right. So I think what I'm hearing from us here is that we all kind of recognize there is this kind of forward-looking propulsion. I mean, this backward-looking kind of propulsion and kind of we want to be accountable for and describing, and we recognize it doesn't quite match maybe what we think reality would like us, how reality works. Anyway, I have, of course, a 3-part schema of the ways in which I don't think it works because I am a debater at heart. Is this the sidebar where I get to say that I saw my daughter do her first debate with Points of Information this week and she took 5 in a row, and I thought she might make the boys who were asking her questions cry with her ferocity of response, and I've never been so proud. But anyway, so
except that as an adjudicator of 15 years, she should have taken 2.
I know. I know, but like there is something about a girl who's just like, yes. It was so good. Anyway, the measurement architecture. Okay. So the 3 problems that I identify, and I think we've kind of almost covered these in some of Danielle's comments, and in particular, the first is a timing problem, right? Like to access funding for the complex intervention, you've got to say, you know, what success looks like before you get the money, like before you get the business case. And that is tricky because that is actually your moment of maximum ignorance. Like that is the moment where you know the least about how your approach to the problem might solve it because you haven't done it yet. So it hasn't hit reality. And so I think like that's both a kind of program design problem in itself, but it's also a kind of information design problem because actually you're designing even the categories that you're going to collect information about at the wrong moment. So I always think of that universal credit example where he was like, we designed the original round of universal credit for monks. Like designed it for single men without children, right? And they're like, actually, the meaningful
very
unit,
statistically uncomplicated though.
Exactly right. But the meaningful unit is the family because it turns out that the family is how all the things flow. So like there's these kind of things that you just don't know until you know that are really important. So I think, and the problem, of course, then is if you change your categories of measurement of kind of how you're measuring success along the way, then people say, you've moved the goalposts. Mm-hmm. You are cheating, the hypothesis scandal that you were talking about, Alison. So that's one kind of issue. And I think a second related kind of issue is that we treat evidence as not exactly binary, but it's like, you know, either there's good evidence formally established through approved methods, and that now increasingly includes lived experienced evidence, but that only comes through a particular kind of method, right? Or there's stuff we don't listen to, evidentially weightless stuff like the mad ladies with the badges saying they're going to run around and be crazy. And we're like, well, that doesn't sound right. So it's really hard, I think, to kind of find a way of listening to different kinds of evidence, especially up front, like especially where you don't have the rich kind of stories to draw on. So I think that, to me, those are 2 at least reasons why I think this kind of question of needing to specify up front can be a challenge. Although now I'm thinking about Alison's point about there's something excellent about saying your hypothesis up front because it forces you to be intellectually honest about what has deviated. So anyway, what do we think of those 2 challenges?
I do think in a policy context, though, one of the things is what you're choosing as the success measure designs the intervention in some ways.
Yeah.
And so if your success measure is unhoused people in secure long-term housing, the intervention that you might use to get to that success measure might look different to unhoused people.
Or people on the street. Yeah, people sleeping on the street, which is a different...
but like a different outcome where their lives are better, but that doesn't necessarily...
mean they're housed. Is that what you mean?
Pivot on housing in that long term. Like maybe they still want to be quite mobile or whatever.
Yes. I don't know why I keep trying to push it through this lens in my head, partly because I know it's the exactly wrong one that it's not designed for, but I keep thinking about election commitments.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's a good one.
Where the end state is what is promised usually. So under an XYZ government, God, can't even think of any
autism inclusion teacher in every classroom.
There's one. So they're election commitments. And so the end state is often if it's
the
non-election
delivery of the thing, not the outcome.
But also the way we're describing the thinking up front is when you are working inside between a service and a minister, or you get to do it in the service completely until you can go to a minister, where you are getting the problem gripped up. And I keep going back to how different that is for an election commitment, where by and large the political class decides that, all street lights will now turn on at 4 p.m. and that is the promise, and that is what you will be. That is what the evaluation measure there will be. The next time that person has to face some kind of ballot box, do all the lights turn on? Now, if we find out 5 minutes later the 5 reasons that is terrible and all of that kind of thing, then there's the kind of how do you make it appear like they're turning on and all of that kind of thing.
Or more, it's like we said they would turn on to increase feelings of safety and security and reduce crime. And if we haven't reduced crime, what was actually the point of turning them on at 4 o'clock?
Yeah, but what we'd measure as, yes. But we didn't say 10% of you will feel safer in the early evening and measure that. We said we'd turn the lights on. And I think that's where election commitments in this case are really challenging, because we never promise to go and measure how many people feel genuinely unsafe walking in a CBD and how many don't, and commit to improving how many feel safe.
Yes.
We come up with the measure.
I mean, to be clear here, we don't.
It's much easier to grab.
Yeah.
Politicians.
the elected government does.
The elected government.
Oh, sorry, I meant we, the system.
I know, but then I think there's an important distinction here about what is your duty as a public servant when faced with an election commitment of that nature and format.
Yeah.
Is it just to make the streetlights turn on at 4 o'clock?
Yeah. Or is it to make 10% of people feel safer walking around in the early evening? No, I don't want to end up too stuck in it. I just keep thinking about how many different policies have a different starting story that you might want to test later. So whether it's like, you could even go outside of election, is it that you did a very massive review or Royal Commission, and is that the day one of saying we're testing that we can deliver these recommendations? Or is it like, it's where the beginning is that I'm struggling with, and who does it? Is it a reviewer? Is it policy people? Is it a backbench MP, and that they then form government, and that is then the starting gate? Like, where's the starting gate for what we said we'd do? Because it can be really different depending on what.
So 2 thoughts. One is that it is, I think, easier as a public servant if you've got a thing, right? A concrete thing. I famously have worked on a number of concrete things that I don't necessarily have lots of skin in the game on. Year 7 to high school is like a nice thing to have done. Like, do I think it was like the number one thing that was going to shift trajectories of children? No, I don't. But what was great about that is the deliverable was really clear. We moved Year 7 to high school, and in doing that, we had a lot of permission to add a lot of value through the system in making that change. And so we went and did that, and we kind of got a much broader set of add-ons to the system as part of that. But from a public service perspective, the minimum thing that you had to deliver was easy. So that's kind of one thought. I think the second kind of area, I hear you, Danielle, about what happens if you're told to do something, if what you're being measured against is something that you think is actively harmful, as opposed to so that wasn't, because what I was going to say is I was going to say is
it's more not harmful, just never really thought through, never had 2 inches underneath it. Yeah. Very blunt and thin. Blunt and kind of.
But I think then it's the job of public servants to deliver as promised, right? You could tell the minister, here are all the reasons why I don't think this is necessarily the thing you want to line up against. But if you're telling me this is what to deliver, this is what to deliver as promised. I also think this is where measurement and evaluation are super helpful, because it's one thing about a public servant to come and say to you, look, I don't think that turning the street lights on at 4 o'clock is going to help with street crime. And if I was Pauline Hanson as the minister receiving that, I would be like, you bloody elites, you think you know how people work and you think that this is actually what's not what's you think it's all about poverty and blah, but I'm telling you it's because there's no lights on, right? Like there is a there's an expertism that public servants can bring to these conversations. I'm feeling a bit hot on it because I was just listening to the Institute for Government's discussion of the challenges in the UK, and they just poo-pooed the idea that it was the anti-racism training that might have informed the police officers' response in the particular case. And I was like that's actually just a question of fact, right? Like, and you're acting like it's a stupid idea that it might be related. Like maybe it's a stupid idea, but actually, like I can see how if I was a politician and that was the answer you gave, I'd be like, actually, I would like to test that. And so this gets to the measurement and evaluation point. I think you do what you're told to do and you say to them up front, like, this is how we're going to, no, I know you're not saying that, but I think this is the value of measurement and evaluation in this context is you're like, we're going to measure and evaluate the thing you told us to do, and we think this is what you're trying to get after, and we're going to look at whether that is, and then you will be able to make a choice about whether you want to keep doing this or not. But like we will have actually delivered and not just kind of done some kind of expert hypothesis that tells you you're a bit stupid and wrong. Anyway, end rant.
And I think to go to Danielle's questions, I mean, the short answer is whoever is in charge of the program can choose the starting point and who does the evaluation. And sometimes you want it done independently and sometimes you want it done internally. And I think the proper public service evaluation frameworks allow for kind of different scales and spectrums of evaluation.
Yeah, I mean, look, listening to that before though, Caroline, when you were like talking about back to our hypothetical streetlights and you were saying like evaluating whether street crime went down, that wasn't what I would have first thought at all. It would be perceptions of community safety, which is a whole discipline in all of its own and generally has almost sweet diddly squat to do with actual crime rates. So perceptions of safety is a thing. And so like would I evaluate whether people felt safer in the city or that whether the lights being on meant that there had been actually less crime. And so this is where there is still room to move, even under a kind of thin, blunt, you may not bother evaluating whether the lights are on because that's a pretty, like, I would imagine
that's true.
Pretty simple kind of thing. But what you tested about whether that did anything, because if everyone feels safer, maybe we should do more of that.
Absolutely.
But what you tested would be, like what you evaluated could be a whole range of things, even with our stupid streetlights.
I like our streetlight example. I'm now going to run for parliament on a streetlight. Oh, Danielle, sorry. This is hitting a really soft spot for Danielle, who is part of a dark skies community in life, so she doesn't believe in streetlights at all. Sorry. I just realised why this is so politically charged. Anyway.
I'm pretty sure there's no crime in that dark lights community.
And you can all go and find it because it's Australia's first ever accredited dark sky community in the great beach of Carrickalinga. I'm being mocked. Please move on, you two.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the timing problem. We've talked a little bit about the kind of the problem around kind of how you weight evidence, which we haven't talked about that. That was just something I said and we didn't reflect on. A third way in which there's a problem with this approach to measurement is this byproduct kind of thing, which is the idea. So I keep thinking about the way Alison talked about placebos and like how good they are in our last episode and how we don't think about how good they are or why they're so good. And I think there's something about kind of how do we ensure that we're capturing byproducts as active and useful pieces of information, not treating them as annoying things that get in our way of where we are. So it's a really interesting question because I've been doing a lot of work, as some of you would know, on kind of early childhood intervention and kind of thriving kids and whatnot. And so I've been down the rabbit hole on measurement frameworks for early childhood interventions. I mean, is this the time for the nerd siren?
Potentially.
Yeah. So, and when you look at kind of measurement frameworks around early childhood intervention services, they look at things that you would imagine like make sense, like how many children, how many sessions, whether they completed the program, what the individual kind of outcomes for the child are in terms of did they meet their plan goals. And sometimes it even goes to like, are they attending school more or whatever. So, you can kind of see there's an approach to measuring the thing that makes sense from the program. But what that way of looking at and measuring the effectiveness of those programs misses is like stuff that it just doesn't even fit in that framing. So Minister Butler often talks about how 1 in 3 boys in the Hunter Valley are on NDIS, right? Like it's a kind of factoid that he uses to kind of make people feel worried about NDIS uptake rates. And all I ever want to ask is like, what do those boys have in common? Who referred them? Is it the local GP? Do they all have the same teacher? Like, is there, like, what are the actual contextual and ecological factors that explain why this concentration of kids, as opposed to other kids who are very similar? Like, why the Hunter? Like, why are we seeing this in the Hunter? And what services have they accessed before? Like, so there's something kind of structural going on here where the measurement framework is designed by people in the centre who kind of look at services and count services, and their job is to kind of make, how we spend money on the NDIS legible, I guess. But the questions that kind of actually matter sit at the edges. They sit where the services are being delivered, where the system is embedded. And it's really hard to get that from the centre. I've been trying to get that from the centre. It is really hard to get that from the centre. So I guess I just wondered if that idea that like you kind of, there are different kinds of knowledge that are hard to capture and hard to generate, whether that resonates in any way.
Yeah, I'm obviously going to stick with
streetlights.
No, not streetlights. Not streetlights, but because actually I was thinking of that one in relation to community safety, which is the other challenge we have is where the evidence or the evaluation crosses portfolios, and where that gets really murky is often criminal justice, where you might be looking at let's evaluate moving, I don't know, dry zones, moving this to there, shutting venues at this time, and did that relate to less hospitalisations for alcohol or drug-induced kind of things between 2 a.m. and 7 a.m? Were there less punch-ups, all of that kind of stuff? But it will often not cross over portfolios. So particularly, we are getting slightly better at this one, but a lot of the time, like it won't look at levels of disability, being unhoused, all these other things, like particularly when we say, is it safer? And again, there are two things. Is there more crime being caught? And more crime being caught doesn't mean more crime either.
Yep.
But we struggle with that idea, which is, we are seeing massively increased amounts of charging and making it to court for domestic violence. Does that mean domestic violence is in any way higher than it was in my grandmother's time? Absolutely not. It means it is more reported. And the same kind of goes for lots of things to do with kind of what people like street violence and liquor and this kind of clash of social problems and criminal justice, which is, if you're looking at it through one portfolio, and this is how we do things most of the time, this is why central agencies, see other episode, are really important, because to be able to connect the idea that, 2 programs have been cut nearby for this and that we're keeping some, at-risk young people busy and they're now gone, and so hang on, we're seeing a spike over here. You need to be able to see the whole board in criminal justice to make any sense of evaluating success. And we do struggle if it's outside of a single portfolio to evaluate the inputs. And what you were saying before, when you talk about the context in the Hunter, that also made me think of 5 years of stories about ADHD prescribing in WA, because that was a thing. And it was like, is anyone looking at the why? And I don't mean the why but the more why, what you were just saying about the Butler Hunter stuff. Every time I hear that, I'm like, haven't we done this before? Did we find out an answer in WA as to what that was about? But that stuff is no longer in a single portfolio, and one portfolio tips into another. So if I evaluate numbers of kids going onto the NDIS, without looking at what a school is doing or can do or whatever, then they're not separate questions, but I'm only evaluating one thing. And so as I frequently sometimes land, I can't think of a better system of government than the one we've got, but it is becoming increasingly difficult to keep everything inside a portfolio area. And I think in evaluation, that is a big problem because you might solve someone else's problem.
Yeah. And my other thought here as well is the kind of gross correlative bias, I guess. Is it one of the 53 biases that people tend to attribute correlation as causation? And so I do think there's a risk that the way that we collect data for evaluation shows something, but the extent to which that outcome was actually connected to the intervention is harder to measure in a number of particularly social services as well.
Yeah, definitely. So then I kind of been doing a little bit of thinking in both my day job and for the pod about what a forward-looking mode of kind of evaluation that tries to encompass these questions of kind of cross-portfolio, cross-disciplinarity, openness to finding things you weren't expecting that you might find. Like, how do you kind of set something up in that way? How do you build better categories of understanding, move from the monk-like men receiving universal credit to families? And I have talked a little bit about universal credit in this context because I think there's something interesting about one way of doing it, which kind of gets at this test and learn, which is, not we're going to do these inputs. We're going to have a very strong North Star, and then we're going to kind of try a whole bunch of different things and see if you get closer to them. So there's a really good story in the pod, in the interview I did with Tom Loosemore, where he talks about how people weren't getting their first payment quickly enough, and every minister and special advisor and newspaper columnist had an answer. Why don't you just do X and Y? Why don't you just? My favourite word, just. And actually, what the senior responsible officer did was set up a kind of multi-D team whose sole focus was, and this was their kind of North Star, reduce time to first payment. And then they just ran hundreds of experiments to kind of work out what would actually move the dial. And they actually made 150 small changes. So little tweaks to the form, tweaks to the process, tweaks to the policy. And the biggest single change turned out to be a word on a form that kind of helped people understand it better and kind of not mess up that bit better. And they tested them and then kind of iterated until they got there. And I think there's something for me about, that is obviously a very, it's a much more agile, faster, but messier way of working. It's not a kind of
literally
gold standard.
Agile in the program management sense. It's minimum viable product and keep going from there.
And keep going. It's the don't stop, it's the keep going. And I think I sent you guys an article which we'll post in the show notes from a guy called Adam Kucharski, who's an epidemiologist, and he draws this contrast between gold standard evidence and aluminium standard evidence. He made this up, aluminium standard evidence.
I love it.
Which I really, right? I also like a kind of good wordplay.
Because we often get people to talk about gold, silver, bronze, but I'm going to add in aluminium. Yeah.
Aluminium, right? Because it's not worse. And in fact, for those of you who know your history, I think Marie-Antoinette ate off aluminium plates, not gold, because it used to be more expensive. But there you go. But gold standard is the kind of rigorous, definitive, designed to rule everything out. Aluminium is what's the fastest, most feasible route to evidence that's good enough for the decision I need to make right now. And the way he says you sort of do that key move is decomposition. So instead of trying to design the whole thing, you test kind of the component uncertainties. So in this case, in the badger trial case, you might have said, for example, the ladies in woolly skirts say that the badgers run away when you kill them. Why don't we just see what happens when we kill the badgers? What happens?
Why don't we test that just track at one or two sites and see if that's true. That's so interesting. That really appeals to me, because it also appeals to me like best decision available for best evidence available for the decision I need to make right now. Because we also do a lot of kind of, I was on that great source of contemporary philosophical information TikTok the other day, and Josh Radner from How I Met Your Mother was talking about 3 sets of decisions: hat, haircut, and tattoo. Your hat decisions are ones that you can remake the decision, and it doesn't really matter. Haircut, you're going to have to live with it for a bit longer. But it is at some level, if not reversible, then modifiable, versus a tattoo level decision, which is we're locked in now and we can't ever go back. And I think we tend to push a lot of government policy and programmatic decisions to be tattoo decisions when they don't need to be.
Yes. And it's like, oh my God. And it makes it hard. Here's my follow-on from that. Not only do we treat them as though they're tattoo level decisions, because we treat them as though they're tattoo level decisions, it encourages people to be secretive about them in their upfront, because they feel like they can't reveal the great reveal of what government might one day do. Whereas it's like, if we held it a bit lighter. Anyway, so
and we said we'll try this and we'll see if it works, and if it doesn't work, we'll take what we learned from it and try something else. Yeah, held it a bit lighter.
So how do we get the balance that against kind of trusting government and a view of like they don't know what they're doing, they're wasting money. Can you believe they tried that thing and it didn't work? I just wonder how you bring the community with you. It's like sometimes I feel like you get a mixed message from the community. One bit is like, if you don't know what's working, just stop. Why would you waste time and money? Test and learn. Like I feel like you get some of that vibe, but you do get a lot of other vibe, which is like, you will be punished basically for failed things. Like the community will rise up if you try something that doesn't work and vote the current government out. And I'm wondering where that leaves, what room that leaves, or where that fits in, and also what we can do to make it all less zero sum, because sometimes you're doing the right thing, or you're doing all of the hang on, we now found this, we should probably go that way, but you're still having to retrofit a bit of a zero sum, everything's exactly fine and will be delivered as per the top 2 lines of that kind of media release. I don't know, I
think for some things, but not for everything.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think there are plenty of things where we can and should and would be better served by engaging in consultation, not on here's what we think a solution to a problem is, but here's what we think the problem is. Do you agree?
Yeah.
It's a problem? Yeah. What parts of it do you think are a problem? How do you think we might solve it? If we tried to solve that bit and it had an impact over here, would that be better or worse? And I just think we leave the questions that policymakers ask and answer so behind closed doors, and that there is absolutely a way to stop people, rising up against government wastage if you bring them into the conflicts that you are trying to manage.
That is an excellent answer, because I was grappling with what you do, and the answer is you bring them earlier. Yeah.
Well, and also it just depends on which community. Like there's no such thing as the community. There are particular groups that have particular feelings about particular things.
It's a whole honest thing.
And yeah, exactly right. And so I think, the question is, how do you there are some where you're always going to be caught in zero-sum games. I don't know. I mean, I actually thought ramping was going to be one of those, although weirdly it's come off the boil. But there are some things where it's like you have to do exactly what you said, exactly how you said it, and you will be punished if it doesn't get done in exactly that way. Fine. That's where you're at, and you're not going to have lots of scope over there.
So do you want to kind of bring us in for a landing here, Caroline?
Okay. All right. Yes, sorry. It's been a meandering wander through things I've been worrying about over the last couple of months. So I appreciate everyone going with me on it. And in particular, I've been worrying about this so much that I've been talking to people about it and sending people lots of articles and blah, blah, blah. And a friend of mine, a very senior public servant.
Everyone just needs to know that Caroline's love language is links.
Yeah.
That
true.
you know.
At least. Anyway, a friend of mine who has been receiving a lot of these, who's a very senior public servant, was reading some of it, and they called me and said, look, it's all very nice, but like really you are radically overestimating the environment in which people are actually making decisions. Mm-hmm. And in particular, the political imperative to be seen to have all the answers up front, the point we just discussed, but also the speed required to stand some things up, like actually you just need to have some offers. And I've been sitting with it because obviously they're not wrong. And I think maybe this is where we're kind of finishing is you don't get to choose your minister's risk tolerance. You don't get to redesign the measurement framework when you're 6 months into the program. Business case was approved 2 years ago and the targets are what they are. But I do think that within everyone's reach, there are some scope of things where you can look to build in a little bit more and a little bit different, right? And it's like, how do we kind of build that muscle of looking? So in Danielle's point on the 4 p.m. light turn off, like for the person who's doing that, like how do they build the muscle of kind of saying, well, and let's also think about what generates feelings of community safety. And, you know, like you can kind of start to evolve a bigger and broader debate. I actually think like one of the things we really need to do is fix the way we do contracting, because it's the contracting that locks in the categories up front. So it's not even evaluation. It's like
such a good
specification of contracting.
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that.
Maybe we'll do... Right, like it's 100% because that's what we count is the delivery of the thing up front. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's my thought is what like, and one I want to put to Eleanor Williams, I think is like, so she's responsible for helping government get comfortable. She is responsible for making government better by adding evaluation. What does she think? How does that fit with this kind of? It's not going to give you a nice, neat answer that says we've saved $12 billion by stopping stupid programs. Like that's not what evaluation is going to add into the world.
And so I think, any reflections on that, Danielle? Otherwise, I think it's probably best that we sit with that uncertainty rather than seek to resolve it, which is more honest than most episodes of anything. What we've been circling is this. The backward-looking accountability architecture isn't wrong. It serves a real purpose, and we should be suspicious of arguments that it should just go away, but it also produces a specific kind of measurement activity that's good at establishing the gap and structurally bad at three things the forward-looking mode needs. It locks in categories at the moment of maximum ignorance. It treats all the knowledge as binary, either formally established or otherwise worthless, when almost everything useful lives somewhere in the middle. And it has no mechanism to absorb those byproducts, those findings that you didn't know were questions. Whether there's a different kind of measurement that works within real constraints, within the decision-making environment Caroline's friend is describing, is what we're going to put to Eleanor Williams at the Australian Centre for Evaluation in a future episode. Our mug winner for this episode is Janet Atwood, who after our Middle Manager episode shared the great anecdote that years ago she was crowned Cassandra by her team for the exact reasons we describe in the episode, and it quickly became quite the in-joke. Love this, Cassandra. Till next time.
Just some appropriately bureaucratic disclaimers. While we've tried to be as thorough in our research as busy full-time jobs and lives allow, we definitely don't guarantee that we've got all the details right. Please feel free to email us corrections, episode suggestions or anything else at thewestminstertraditionpod@gmail.com. Thanks to Pampot Audio for our intro and outro music. Till next time.